TRC. Real quickly, just stand on your feet real quickly. Lift your hands up and let's just worship the Lord really quickly. I want you to lift your voice right now because a lot of us came in here heavy today. A lot of us came in here tired today. And I'm not just saying that because we come tired. I'm saying that because we feel tired today. And before we can really get into what the Lord's saying, I want everybody to lift your voice and lift your hands and surrender right this second. I want you to tell the Lord how much you love him. I want you to tell the Lord how much he means to you. I want you to tell the Lord how much you appreciate him. I want you to lift your voice in here. Tell the Lord how good he is to you. God, you're so good to us. You are so good to us, Father God. We love you. Father God, we love you. Father God, we honor your name today. We worship your name today. We love you. Give the Lord a hand clap of praise. Today I want to do a couple of things, but before we get into that, I want to first give honor to the pastor of this house. I know we have given him honor already, and it's not because of protocol, it's just because I honor you. And I also want to give honor to the co-pastor of this house. I know he's already said it, but my parents are in the house. And I want everybody here to know that I'm not preaching here the first time, but this is their first time coming to a Sunday service. So I don't want you to feel like it's because of me. My little sister was dancing, and the baby always gets the attention. So, Talia, when Dakota preaches, just don't take it personally. I want to honor, of course, most importantly, my wife. It's nothing like a partner. It's nothing like a best friend. It's nothing like having someone to run things, bounce things off of. It's nothing like, I find this incredibly interesting. My wife listens to more Christian hip-hop than me. She does. Yesterday, she was telling me about all the artists, which is funny. I mean, y'all don't know this. Some people know that about me. It's funny if you knew me 10 years ago. And it's just, there are certain times where God made a certain person for you. And God made this person for me. TRC, if you wouldn't mind turning with me really quick before we sit down. If you wouldn't mind turning to me to a really difficult story. I'm going to try to gracefully tell it. It is located in Genesis 19, but we're going to Genesis 19 and 23. When you have it, say, I got it. When you have it, say, I got it. We're going to start at number 23 and go to 26. I am, of course, reading from what version of the Bible? Nope, the NIV. I don't read no Amplified. Verse 23. By the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Then the Lord rained down a burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, destroying all those living in the city, also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. I want you to hang with me for a second. Ride along, shall you, in a message simply called salt. Feel free to have your seats. You know, every time I speak here at the river, I say something like, take out your notepads, or this is a note-taking kind of experience. And hopefully I have said that enough to have built somewhat of a brand that when I speak, y'all got to focus maybe and pay attention, because you might miss something. Because you know by now, I'm not going to be able to get up here and tune up and hoop like Pastor. And I'm not going to be perfectly stylistically or grammatically impeccable like Pastor. And I'm certainly not going to be the one who runs through here like a lightning bolt and bulldozes in the spirit like Co. Get out of the way. Not to mention that they both can sing, and y'all know you ain't going to get me up here malpracticing. Not a chance. Imagine that. I get up here, get to singing, and immediately the atmosphere is compromised, and y'all come out the spirit quicker than you do when your foot hits the parking lot after service. Not a chance. Not going to happen. But it could possibly happen. You could possibly think that, Pastor Shawn speaking this week. I need to go ahead and disable Facebook before service. I need to put TikTok notifications on silent. I need to delete Instagram off my phone real quick. Matter of fact, let me put the phone in airplane mode, because I might miss something. And perhaps today you forgot I was speaking. And right now you're thinking to yourself, darn it, I forgot to disable social media. Or maybe you need to make one last post or send out one last text message before we really get into this. So let me give you a second to go ahead and pull out your phones. Let me give you a second to go ahead and pull out your phones and make your last post. Send your last text message. Go ahead and repost TRCs to your to your Facebook or whatever. And then after that, go ahead and put your phone on airplane. Not silent, not vibrate, not do not disturb. Airplane. Because you can still read your Bible on airplane mode. You guys ready? Those of us who actively advocate for the lower income African American community often have conversations about the disproportionate incarceration rates. We discuss complex ideas like the school to prison pipeline, or those of us who understand the data that drives certain things like fatherless homes or high divorce rates. We in this world oftentimes hear a word called recidivism. Recidivism is a term used to refer to a criminal who was once locked up, released, then find themselves locked up again. It is the unfortunate but perpetual cycle of not being able to come out of an illegal behavior. See, once the mind has connected itself to a system, it is very difficult to detach from that system. Because systems bring a level of safety to the mind, even if the system itself is fatally unsafe. And you often can take your body out of a system, but the mind still exists in it. The body is very much out, but the mind is still functioning as if the body is still there. See, an ex-offender who has spent a decade behind bars now gets released to a psychologically unstable reality, where the fact that they have a criminal record prohibits most jobs, and the average one-bedroom apartment is $2,200, and the average car is $40,000, and your support system is non-existent, and the community remembers your criminality but not your personality. Y'all may think going to jail is the worst thing in the world. But people coming out of jail think this crazy reality is for the birds. No offense to the family. Y'all think behind bars is terrible, but y'all are always 2 rent payments away from you and your kids being on the street. The reality of coming into this world after prison feels like trickery. It's like, how do y'all live like this? And the idea of something like eviction is so scary for someone coming out of prison, because it may not be that comfortable, but at least I got somewhere to sleep. It may not be that delicious, but at least I know where my next meal is coming from. No, it may not be ideal, but at least I know what I'm up against. At least I know what to expect. See, the mind is creepy sometimes. Some of us have stayed in abusive relationships, just toxic, not because we didn't know it was toxic, but because at least we knew what we were getting there. We have gone back to exes we know that cheat. We have gone back to friends we know that backstab. We have gone back to jobs we know mishandle us. Going to the same job that's underpaying, overworking, micromanaging, and overstressing for 30 years. Because the mind will wire itself into a system that even though this place is toxic, at least I know what I'm up against. At least I know what to expect. The mind will wrap itself in a system, even if that system is abuse. We just stay in places where we're disrespected and disregarded and gaslighted and emotionally abused, because at least I know what I'm up against. I have learned how to survive there. At least I know what to expect, and I feel secure, even if my security is anchored in an unsecure place. It is in this fabricated, the psychologically manufactured sense of safety that we find ourselves in this message. I'm just not you. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is one of the most popular, most referenced Old Testament stories in the entire Bible. It is told in Genesis, but is referenced in Deuteronomy, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Lamentations, Amos, Zephaniah, Matthew, Mark, Luke, Peter, Jude, and Revelation. It is referenced more than any other story in the Bible, which is a testament to its overall importance to the Bible story itself. Sodom and Gomorrah is an incredibly important story. It is a story that we should all understand, and I want to talk to you today about this story and how we could possibly apply it to our own lives. The most important character in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is who? Who? If you said Lot, you are wrong. The most important person in this story is actually not mentioned in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. The most important person in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is Abraham. And see, in order to understand how Abraham is connected to this part of the story, we have to go back to the 13th chapter of Genesis, when Abraham's name was Abram. Abram had a nephew, and his nephew's name was Lot. Lot had Abram as a father figure, and Abram had Lot. Now, because of Abram's age, Abram just knew a son was not in the cards for him. But Abram was okay with that because Lot was family, and he was the closest thing he had to a son. Abram loved Lot because sometimes we just accept the reality as we see it and play the cards we are dealt. Because the greatest deterrent to faith is not the enemy. The greatest deterrent of faith is reality. The greatest deterrent of faith is not the enemy. The greatest deterrent of faith is reality. It is the evidence of things not seen. Therefore, things seen have evidence. I can see you. The greatest deterrent of faith is reality. But with the acceptance of this reality, Abram raised his nephew Lot as a son. He raised him, he protected him, he cared for him, he loved him as if he was his own child. And Lot stayed with Abram, his uncler. Funkle. As the matriculation of the two men ran its course, they found that there wasn't enough space in the land for the both of them. Lot and Abram's herdsmen began bickering and fighting over whose land is whose sheep should go where, and who gonna clean up the poo. That's not true, that's not in the Bible. So in his wisdom, Abram said to Lot in Genesis 13:8, let's not have any quarreling between me and you, or between your herdsmen or mine. We are close relatives. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part companies. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. And if you go to the right, I'll go to the left. Because sometimes, to preserve the relationship, we got to get out of each other's space. And that's for you who are entrepreneurial. You can't always hire your friends. Because I hired you based on our relationship, but you lazy at work, and this is a high-pressure environment, and it's pissing me off, and your behavior there is going to jeopardize the friendship we had before you got there. That's why your favorite cousin doesn't necessarily make the best roommate. Well, the house was always clean when I went there. Yeah, that's because they cleaned in preparation for company, but on a day-to-day basis, they was nasty. And so you didn't see it before because when you were going over there, you was a guest. We can't live in an environment together if we're going to keep a relationship. So in Genesis 13:10, Lot looks to the east, where he saw a land that, from his view, looked like the garden of the Lord. It looked like Eden. Because one way or another, we are all looking for the garden of the Lord. We are all looking for Eden. Regardless of what culture you are, what ethnicity, what race, doesn't matter if you're from Northwest D.C. or Southeast D.C. or Waldorf or West Baltimore. We are all looking for the garden. Why do you need to go to the beach 3-4 times a year? You need the garden. Why does pastor need to go on a cruise at the end of the year to see nothing but water? I don't know. He needs the garden. Why do you need to go hiking in the mountains of Colorado? The garden. You're attracted to the rainforest or the blue waters of the islands? The garden. What is that need? That need is an instinctual attraction to the place you were originally meant to occupy. You are attracted to the garden of the Lord. You are attracted to Eden. 4 years ago, in the year of our Lord 2019, my son, Shawn, moved to the beautiful Orlando, Florida. In the month preceding his ascension to perceived paradise, I had to find him an apartment. So we went to the website to find him an apartment that was both within our budget. When I say our, I mean my. And within 1 mile of the school because he was walking. Now, we landed on an apartment that was beautiful, just beautiful. The pictures were awesome. The website, amazing. Palm trees, people smiling, happiness everywhere. We said, this must be the place. Because it spoke to our innate attraction to Eden. It reminded us of the garden of the Lord. Now, when we got there, we found that they failed to mention in their advertisement the infestation of rodents. They failed to disclose in their advertisements that the cockroaches in Florida are 1.5 to 2 inches large, and they will be running around the apartment when we open the door. They just failed to mention that part. See, it wasn't on the website. See, when Lot looked to the east, he thought he saw the garden of the Lord. He thought he saw Eden, but he found himself in Sodom. And from a distance, Sodom looked like the garden of the Lord. It was a man-made city, and man-made places are made to appear like God. But man-made places don't bring you peace or serenity. They're often very chaotic, which is the reason why we want to get away from them. It's chaotic, like Sodom or Babylon or 95 during traffic or New York or Branch Avenue this morning. They're just as me and Shawn thought we'd found paradise, we actually find ourselves in Sodom. Would not recommend. 0 stars. But yet, and still, Lot dealt with the reality that was in front of him, and he took up residence in Sodom. In the ancient days, Sodom was what we would think of today as an advanced society, advanced city. In today's comparison, it would be a New York, a Chicago, a DC, and LA. Sodom and Gomorrah was known for its human ingenuity and human creativity. And human creativity is not necessarily a bad thing, but God was going to destroy these cities not because of ingenuity. That was not why. He wanted to destroy this place because the culture they built, the foundation they normalized, was detestable. It was so evil, so wicked, so vile, so detestable that God said the entire thing got to burn down. Yes, it was a place of great creativity and great ingenuity, but understand something, you can be both gifted and guilty. You can be both talented and toxic. You can be both anointed and abhorrent. You can offer something so beautiful to the world, yet be such a virus that God can't stand you, so he's got to flush you out, lest you sicken the rest of the body. The Lord wanted, understand this, the Lord wanted to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah because it was a virus to humanity. Sodom and Gomorrah was so evil. I tried to clean this up for the babies, so I tried. Sodom and Gomorrah was so evil. It had made permissible and even state-sanctioned things like gang rape. Meaning to exert control over people for not adhering to our laws, our traditions, our practices. Mobs could descend upon a person and violate them in the worst possible way. It was such egregious sexual violence that most victims did not live through the event. And this was acceptable. This was a normal Tuesday in Sodom and Gomorrah. Y'all like distracting. You see what they did? You see how they pulled that? Sodom and Gomorrah was like the purge. Living in Sodom and Gomorrah meant that you lost your moral compass. And to survive, you had to accept these insane behaviors as okay. God wasn't willing to accept this at all, because of this evil place had the possibility of jeopardizing all of humanity. So to prevent this one city from infecting humanity as a whole, God had to rid us of this place. So he sent angels to destroy it. But before he sent them to the city, they had to make a pit stop first. Where? At Abram's house. Now, in this passage of Genesis 18, Abram's name is now Abraham. For a whole different story. But the angels came to him for two reasons. The first reason they came is to let him know that his 100-plus-year-old self and his 100-plus-year-old wife was going to have a child between this time and this time next year. They also came to tell him that they were on their way to destroy the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, because the Lord found no righteous in Sodom and Gomorrah. But in Genesis 18:24, Abraham stopped them and pleaded for Sodom and Gomorrah. There's got to be some righteous down there, God. What if there's 50? You just gonna off everybody for it? It's just 50? The Lord's like, well, if there's 50, I'll save the city. And Abraham said, well, wait, well, what if it's like 45? That's just 5 off. And the Lord said, well, if it's 45 righteous, we'll save the city. And they played this song and dance until they got all the way down to 5. And the Lord said, even if there's 5, I'll save the entire city. This whole conversation with the Lord was the Lord saying to Abraham that if there is any righteous, I'll save the city. One of the most mind-blowing revelations about this interaction is that it isn't apparent that Abraham's plea with God was out of the greater concern for the broader population. It doesn't seem like Abraham's concern was about the principle of justice itself. There's no biblical evidence that Abraham was all about the people like David or Solomon. There's no evidence that Abraham was all about the principle like Moses or Paul. But the evidence points directly to Abraham's concern for Lot. He seems to be asking these questions, trying to figure out if he can save his nephew. Because the Lord is saying there are no righteous in Sodom and Gomorrah. But Lot was in Sodom and Gomorrah. The Lord was saying there's no righteous in Sodom and Gomorrah. And Lot was in Sodom and Gomorrah. And unless you think God makes mistakes or he somehow miscounted, you didn't understand that that means Lot was not righteous. We have empirical evidence that Lot was more Sodom than Sodom. You know, the Lord knew what Abraham's real concern was. So he sent the angels first to Lot. Because what some of us do not understand is that some of us were saved from imminent destruction while in our jacuzzi of sin, not because we're extra special, because we were connected to somebody righteous. You beat the charge because you had a praying grandmother. That relationship you were supposed to be in, that abuser would have broke your neck, but your mama was praying for you. While you was in the club getting your party on, what stopped that man from pouring that little white substance in your drink? It ain't have nothing to do with you. You were connected with somebody righteous, and because of them, God had a protection around you. You were safe because you connected with righteous. You were safe because you were connected with favor. You were safe because you were connected to somebody committed to God. Let me tell you something that's going to blow your mind. Your righteousness may be the only thing standing between your child and destruction. Y'all be so spiritually selfish, so your righteousness ain't just about you. Your righteousness ain't just about yourself. Your righteousness is about everything you are connected to. God has never functioned in an every man for himself formula. That's some westernized American capitalism theology. You think you praying for your child for nothing? Your righteousness can cover them. Because the same righteousness that is covering you is covering everything you're connected to. Even if what you're connected to ain't got it together yet. Go to the text. In Genesis 19:1, from the New International Version, the two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face on the ground. "My lords," he said, "please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night and then go away early in the morning." I just need you to look at something really quick. The Bible was written in Hebrew and translated into English. There are certain little intricacies of the Bible that you got to understand. In 19:2, it says, "My lords," Lords. That is an English word. And if anyone in here watches Bridgerton, my lord means sir in Old English. If it said capital Lords, we'd be talking about something divine. But we understand Lot's language. He was not saying my Lord as an acknowledgement of the Lord. He was saying my Lord, and that Lord is not actually translated into Hebrew. That's just an English word when we translated this Bible into the lowercase Lord. So it could say sir. It could say bruh. It could say, I don't know, yo. Now, spend the night, you can go on your way early in the morning. And they answer him, no, we will spend the night in the square. But he insisted so strongly, for one reason or another, that they did not go with him and enter, that they go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Before they had gone to bed, all of the men, how many of them? All of the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. Now, historically speaking, Sodom and Gomorrah likely happened between the year of 2100 BC and 1900 BC. And in that time period, an advanced city like that would have tens of thousands of people, some 10,000 people to tens of thousands of people. And if we're being conservative with the numbers, we could say that maybe it wasn't tens of thousands. Maybe it was simply a conservative 10,000 people in the city. So let's say on average there were 10,000 people, so there were 3,000 men, 3,000 women, and if you take a look here, 4,000 children. Right? So it says in verse 4, all of the men surrounded the house. Not 10, not 20, not 50, not 100. All of them. Which tells you about the culture of Sodom and Gomorrah. Because how you galvanize that many people in one night from every corner of the city. You ain't have Facebook. You ain't have social media. You didn't have TV, XM radio, email, nothing. But somehow you were able to communicate to thousands of people and have all of them come out for the deplorable party, because that's what you do. 3,000 aggressive people is more than the ones who barged in on the Capitol building on January the 6th. That was just over 2,000 people, and that was supposed to be one of the most secure buildings in the world. Let's go to verse 5. Oh, verse 5. I'm going to read out of the NIV purposely because I want you to understand the language. They called to Lot, meaning the men. They called to Lot. Where are the men that came to you tonight? Bring them out so that we can have sex with them. Now, the language of the NIV and most modern translations of this story gives a misleading impression that the mob of possibly 3,000 people were out for sexual pleasure or intimacy with these men. Because in our modern language, the word sex has to do with pleasure or intimacy. Now, the King James Version does not use the word sex. The King James Version uses the word know them. And it's directly translated from the Hebrew word yada. And yada is what we will refer to in English as a polysemantic, which means it could have several meanings depending on its context. Given this context and the broader use of yada in the Bible, it's widely accepted that among biblical scholars and translations that in verse 5, to know refers to a violent sexual intention, dominance, rape, control, violence. And contrary to what anyone says, rape is not about pleasure. Rape is violence. It is about control. It is about dominance. Send those men out so we can teach them a lesson. So we can show them whose city they came into. Verse 6 is, I think, verse 6 through 8, I think, is what piques my interest about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah the most. And verse 6 through 8 is the reason you got to sit through this right here today. Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind him. Lot went out to meet them and shut the door behind him. I shut the door because I don't want the people to inside of my house know the negotiation I'm about to have with the men that I know in Sodom. Right? I don't want the people inside of the house to know about the negotiation we about to have with the men outside of the door. In verse 7, Lot says, "No, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look," in verse 8, "I have 2 daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do whatever you want to them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof." Let me tell you how this story bothered me, other than the girl dad thing. To the point I had to study and restudy and study more. I had to understand the historical context. Yes, I had to grasp another civilization's cultural norms. And yes, I had to understand that in this culture, women were often treated like second-class citizens. And yes, I understand that daughters were more often than not treated like property. However, considering all of that, my question of this verse still remains. At the end of the verse, it said, "Don't do anything to these men, because they have come under the protection of my roof." And I said, well, where did your daughters live? Where did your daughters live? Speaking of daughters and granddaughters, did they not live under the same roof? And were they not deserving of the same protections? Lot closed the door because he knew what he's about to offer in negotiation was really immoral. Lot was more Sodom than Sodom. And I went to God over this. I said, I need to understand Lot's mind. I need to understand Lot's thinking. And the Lord brought this old saying that the chickens have come home to roost. And what do I mean? Let me explain. Lot, you chose this place. You stayed in this place. You accepted the behavior and the culture of this place. You knew what you were dealing with because you likely participated in the behavior. Sodom was a virus. You went to Sodom. You got infected. You became Sodom. And now Sodom is literally at your doorstep. The men started yelling, "Get out of the way." And Sodom tried to block him. And they yelled to him, "Get out the way before we do you worse than we about to do them." Got to understand that Lot was one of them. So to be told that was a threat. So they started pushing Lot to the door to break it down. And the men inside the house grabbed Lot, pulled him in, slammed the door, barricaded it, whatever. Then they struck everybody down. The angels that had came to Lot's house struck everybody that was trying to get in the house down with blindness. And so they told Lot, "Do you have anybody in this city? Sons-in-laws, children, whatever. Get them and get out." So his daughters apparently was betrothed to 2 men too. So the same ones he was about to give up to the mob were also betrothed to be married to 2 sons-in-law. And so he went to his sons-in-law and said, "Hey, we got to get out the city because the Lord is about to destroy it." And his sons-in-law were like, Yeah, you must be joking. Since when do you got a relationship with the Lord? They thought he was joking. They didn't even believe him. Who do you go around? Who do you go around that has no idea that you saved? If you came around saying, thus saith the Lord, it would hold no weight because you have no credibility. When you invite people to friends and family day, they're like, oh no, I would never go to that church because you go there. They think the whole church shady because of you. With the coming of dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, hurry, take your wife, and not your sons-in-law, because they're not going. Take your life and your two daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when this city is punished. And in verse 16, it says, and when he hesitated, the men had to grasp his hands and the hands of his wife and his two daughters and lead them safely out of the city. It say it in the King James. Now, they told him to flee, go to the next city. Now I had a question. Why couldn't the angels just grab Lot and rescue him for Sodom when they met up? I mean, they met him at the entrance of the city. They could have just said, Lot, grab your family, we got to get out now. But Lot was not a biblical hero. He was not Noah. God said, build this ark. Noah was like, bet. He was not Moses. God said, tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Moses was like, bet. After a little conversation, Moses was like, bet. Because we so indignant in sin. We so wired in our sin. So partnered with our sin. So comfortable in our sin. So comfortable that you done forgot it was sin. And the only way God can deliver you is if he brings you to the brink of death. If he brings it to your doorstep. Every time I see you get in that car, you're driving 95 miles per hour. Wise people keep telling you, stop driving that stupid Dodge Charger that fast. But you fail to listen because you think you that special. You ignore the speed limits. You run lights. You done got $3,500 worth of tickets this year. And none of this stops you because you're wired into thinking you're the invincible exception. Then one day, an unexpected object is in the road and you swerve that car at 95 miles per hour and that car flips over and barrels down the road. Now you find yourself in the hospital fighting for your life because you're so wired he got to bring it to your doorstep. Woe to the I can handle my liquor people. Just drinking. You got it under control. You know the legal limits. You know your family history. You done saw every warning. You done seen all the commercials. You done came to the church. The prophet done told you to get it together until one day you find your vehicle wrapped around the telephone pole, fighting for your physical life, then facing manslaughter from fighting for your freedom. Because you're so wired, he's got to bring it to your doorstep. Why does it take so much? Because for you, he can't just snatch you out the easy way, the simple way. For you, he has to bring you to the brink of death where you're fighting for your life, and like a criminal in the comfortability of prison system, he had to sever the wires, bring you closer to death, lest you'd go back. Because not only does he receive, but does he deliver you from the thing, he delivers you from the possibility of going back to it. The possibility of recidivism. What's another word for recidivism? Relapse. What's another word for recidivism? Backsliding. One more point. In the Bible, salt has two primary uses. The first was the preservation of food, especially raw, uncooked meats. In the ancient world, you didn't have things like refrigerators and deep freezers to keep your uncooked meats until you was ready to eat it. So you have to pack your meat with salt so that you could preserve it. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth." Here, salt is symbolic of value, preservation, and influence. Salt was essential in ancient times for preserving food, so being called the salt of the earth suggests a person's valuable and influence in the world. He was not suggesting you are the world's seasoning. He was saying you are the preservation thereof. The second use of salt was agricultural, to kill a plant or weed at the roots, drying the soil and inherently killing the weed's ability to grow. Salt is depicted as unproductive and barren in the Bible in Deuteronomy 29:23. In Jeremiah 17:6, the imagery of salted, uninhabitable land is conveying God's judgment. Salt was used to stop a weed from growing lest it destroy the tare. Lot's wife was only mildly mentioned in this story. She has no name. She has no face. We know nothing about her except that she was Lot's wife. She was only mentioned twice. The first time she was mentioned is when the angel told Lot to take his wife and his two daughters and leave. That was the first time. The second time she was mentioned as a very secondary thought, but Lot's wife looked back and she turned into a pillar of salt. And this little half mention about this nameless woman would become one of the most important verses in the Bible. Let's look at verse 23. By the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Every translation, every instance, every story of every instance of this story says that Lot made it to Zoar before Sodom and Gomorrah started burning. So the thought that they were running from Sodom and Gomorrah while it was burning to the ground is simply not supported by evidence or scripture. The thought that Lot's wife turned around from behind him and literally looked at Sodom and boom, turned to a pillar of salt don't actually make sense. So I must have misunderstood what the Bible means by the phrase look back. In verse 26, Hebrew used for looking back, va-tabet, arahi. Va-tabet, arahi. This comes from the Hebrew verb, va-tabet comes from the Hebrew verb to look or to gaze. Atahi is a compound word, means behind or after, and then tahi means the masculine or singular. So together, this phrase could literally be translated as she looked back behind him. No, she looked behind him. That's the literal translation. The act of looking back behind is emphasized in this context, but it was never about physical looking or turning. It's called transliteration. It means it's translated into what it literally says in English. And that literally means she turned around and looked. However, for the Bible geeks here, there was a meme going around last week. And the meme said that 2,000 years ago, people are going to study our era and not know the difference between a butt dial and a booty call. Because when they're translated into other languages, they appear to mean the same thing. But they're totally different. One means you call somebody on accident, and one means you call somebody very much on purpose for a purpose. Look back in this translation means longing and regret. The Bible is saying that Lot's wife the Bible is saying Lot's wife felt a longing for her life in Sodom, a regret for ever leaving the place. It was better where I was. She longed for the connection because she was wired into Sodom. In her eyes, when she left, there was nothing abnormal happening to her. She ain't seen no destruction because they was leaving. It wasn't burning yet. She didn't see no destruction. We didn't be in here all this time. You ain't never said nothing about the Lord. I don't know why I came with you. I was happy where I was. I know what I was getting there. I knew what to expect. She longed for Sodom because Sodom is what she knew. She had no desire to change. In the context of this story, last Hebrew word I'm going to say, Nasiv. That was the term pillar. It means post or statue. In ancient times, they were often erected as a commemorative monument, a vertical statue. It is clear to me that God was trying to send a message to the rest of humanity by making Lot's wife a vertical statue and of salt specifically used to kill growth. Lot's wife represented a greater problem for the whole of humanity, not just individual problem of her own disobedience. She was infected with Sodom. And if God allowed her to go to a new place, she would infect the new place. The Lord is saying to the people of God today, if I can't get you to disconnect from the toxic system that you have wired your mind into, I'm going to hold you still like a pillar and prevent your growth like the salt on the root of a weed. Don't make me have to protect what I'm building from you.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
You've got to make a decision to disconnect. You've got to make a decision to not look back. You've got to make a decision to move forward because your old mind is a virus to your new place. Your old mind will compromise your new place. God cannot allow you to come into millions when you run your finances like you live in poverty. Your old mind is a virus to your new place. God cannot allow you to get into a marriage when you're still wired to the pain of your old relationship. Because your old mind will compromise a new place. I can bring your future husband in your life right now because right now you will damage him. Your old mind will wreck your new place. I cannot move you into home ownership. I can't move you into home ownership when you still function like a roommate. Your old mind will jeopardize your new place. You can't make six figures and have a $15 an hour work ethic. Because I can't allow you to grow if you're a weed amongst the tare. God's desire is to get some of you into a new place that is spiritually, emotionally, financially, and physically. But what's holding you in place is your toxic connection to the place God is trying to deliver you from. You still calling to check on people he's trying to deliver you from. You're longing for the life you had. You're ruminating on the good times. Every time Facebook put the memory up, you long for the good old days with regret. Facebook get on my nerves with them things. We ain't been friends for 13 years. I don't want to see the pictures. We running, longing for the good old days. Pillars of salt. Pillars of salt. You want to know why you're not growing like you want to? You want to know why you're not moving forward like you want to? Look around. You standing in salt. How can I move you to a new place when you keep telling me that things were better from the place I delivered you from? You're standing in salt. The more you try to connect with it, the more salt you're going to throw on it. Because I won't allow you to go back to the old place, nor would I allow you to damage the new place. Disconnect or be salted. You want to move forward? Disconnect from the life you thought that you were going to live. You want to move forward? Detach from the things you thought you was going to be. TRC, you want to move forward in year 4? Then detach from the trauma of year 3. Come out the salt. Come out of the salt. Come out of the salt. We at this church, we built a church in the middle of a pandemic. I'm sorry. Let me say that again. God built the church specifically for post-pandemic, which is the reason why he told us to build in the midst of a pandemic. However, the things that stop this church from growing is when we try to make it but pre-pandemic what God placed for post-pandemic. When we try to build a pre-pandemic church in a post-pandemic world. When he built this church for post-pandemic. If God wanted us to be pre-pandemic, he would have told Pastor to start 2 years earlier. And Pastor would have started 2 years earlier. If we want to move forward in year 4, we got to be healed from year 3. We got to be healed from year 3. We got to be healed from year 3. We have to be healed from the places that we are from, that we came from. If we're going to go forward in this new season, we got to be healed from the place that we came from. For some of us, that's places in our lives, there's expectations that we have, that's former relationships. For some of us, it's year 3. It's year 3. It's year 3. In this moment, if you know that there is something you need to release, that you finally need to let go, that you finally need to permanently let go, let's bring it to the altar right now. If you are waiting for the Lord, if you are wanting the Lord to get you to the next point, but you realize that you're standing still, I invite you to the altar to let it go right now. God, I need you to heal me from what I am accustomed to. I need you to heal me from where I've come from. I need you to heal me from where I've been through, because I cannot take an old place to a new space. I cannot take an old place. I cannot take a mentality of where I was to where God's trying to take me. And I recognize that I can't get there unless I let it go, because God's not going to let me get there. Secondarily, I want to invite you to the altar. If you want to intercede for this place that we stand in right now,